If this isn't how you spend your Fridays in the off season, perhaps you should reconsider some things. Oh. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews. I'm your host, Sean Delray. First of all, okay, a couple things. One, I need to allow myself more than 3 seconds to get this off next time, apparently. And also, two, I forgot how freaking heavy these things are. Gosh. So, all right. Now, today we are talking about potential statistical risers for the Green Bay Packers. And I bounced away a number of different ways to do this. Do I want to look at team records or guys that just could ascend because the schematic circumstances are going to be different for them this year? And what I really settled on was that I really wanted to get at was choosing one guy from each position that could potentially see a large increase in their production, in certain stats at the very least. But the reason why that hasn't occurred yet, or there's something that they can improve to make that happen. So this is a very numbers dive type episode. And for the positions that have only one guy, like one clear-cut starter, like quarterback, we'll just talk about something that he can improve upon to make his overall season be better. But for the positions where there's a multitude of guys like wide receiver, then we're just going to isolate one guy that I think can take a major statistical jump this year. Today, we're going to be covering just the offense. Monday, be on the lookout for the same thing, except defense and, still special teams, although I don't know about long snapper. So before we get to all of that, I do have one other news bit to talk about, and it's something that's been massively circulating the interwebs since yesterday really is where it first broke, and then today we got kind of some development on the headlines. And if you didn't see it yet, here's a quick recap. Josh Jacobs appeared on one of the national broadcasts, or one of the national podcasts. And Josh Jacobs was talking about that week 1 matchup in Brazil against the Philadelphia Eagles. And Jacobs said that he's been told, or he's heard, that the Green Bay Packers are not going to be allowed to wear green because of gang violence in Brazil. And then not only that, but from the hotel to the stadium, they're going to be taking armored cars and stuff like that. And I will say, if you go back and watch that clip with Jacobs, it does sound very much like a guy who's just saying what he's heard, what he's been told. But yesterday when that came down, that did kind of raise up the antennas of a number of Packer reporters, certainly people around the league too. It's not exactly a fantastic quote to be going around. And then today, more clarification came. And the first one that I saw with clarification came from Jason Wilde. He said that he talked with an employee of the Packers, and that's actually not the case. In an indirect way, though, he did seem to confirm that the Packers are not going to be wearing green in week 1, or that the Eagles won't either. But it has nothing to do with gang violence. What it actually is in respect to is, and I know you probably have seen this because this has been going around for a couple of months already since the Packers got declared that they're going to play Brazil, but the fact that in that stadium you don't wear green because it's the color of their biggest rival from that stadium. So it's like a respect to not wear that color in that stadium. And there's been a lot of talk about whether the NFL would follow it or not or whatever. Wilde said that the reason for not wearing green is because of that, not because of gang violence. So here we got a couple bits of news, right? Confirmed by all accounts that they're not going to be wearing green in week 1. We might see a white versus black uniform matchup. But then also, too, Josh Jacobs almost certainly got some kind of talking to today, either by Packers PR, NFL PR, whatever, because then Jacobs put out on his socials, yeah, I heard wrong. It's not about gang violence. It's about the rivalry. Okay, so let's just say this: we don't know where Jacobs got that. Could have been misconstrued. Could have been just like the game telephone in the NFL locker room. Who ultimately knows, right? But these headlines are still heavily being circulated. I still have seen them a lot today, even after it's been squashed from different angles, including Wilde and Jacobs himself. So just wanted to update you on that. Sounds like the Packers won't be wearing green. Also sounds like that it's not actually because of gang violence. It actually is the storyline that we've been told for multiple months now, that it's the whole stadium thing. All right, so let's get on from that. That's really the only newsworthy thing of the day, so now you're caught up. But let's talk how the Packers, individuals, what they can improve to enhance their stats this year. So let's start, with that guy, future $50 million man, Jordan Love. Okay, this is a little complicated. You got to go with me on this journey here. But we're going to be talking about the time that it takes Love to throw. Generally speaking, for a lot of quarterbacks, the quicker you throw, oftentimes the more successful you are. Even think back to some of Rodgers' most successful years. We would see that quick drop back when he was playing in rhythm, which was always the popular phrase. But when it comes to Jordan Love, some of his most successful games came from games that he actually took longer to throw than normal. So I did a little bit of parsing through here. Basically, there were 6 games of the season where Jordan Love had at least 245 yards passing, multiple touchdowns thrown, and 1 or fewer interceptions thrown. 6 games. They were the following weeks: 1, 12, 13, 15, 17, 18. As if you needed more evidence that the second half of his year was really, really good, 5 of those games in the back end of the year, but it's 1, 12, 13, 15, 17, 18. Now listen to his time to throw from each of those weeks, keeping in mind that his season average was 2.72, taking across all of the throws all year long, weeks 1 through 18, just the regular season, 2.72 seconds was his average time to throw. In week 1, it was 2.8. Week 12, 2.9. Week 13, 2.73. Week 15, 2.81. Week 17, 2.41. And week 18, 2.74. Keep in mind that the average is 2.72. So there you go. In terms of what could be called his 6 most successful regular season games of the year, 5 of them were actually games where he took longer to throw, games where he was above his average time to throw. So does that mean that Jordan Love needs to dance around in the pocket more? No, not necessarily. Because we've also seen that Jordan Love is very, very successful at playing in rhythm. But it is very statistically important to realize that. Because there were other games where he was under his average and they just weren't as successful from a pure statistical output. So, of course, looking at all statistics, right? We need to keep this in mind through every single player we're going to discuss, both offense and defense. There's the question of causality or coincidence, right? Is the fact that Jordan Love was taking longer to throw in these games indicative of the fact that that's what's causing the better games? We don't know. Can't say that for certain, right? What we can say for certain is that, at least according to PFF, in these 6 games, they happen to be, again, some of his highest performing graded games of the year. Because in those 6, his week 1 grade, 59.4. Those are his passing grades. Week 12, 87.9. Week 13, 90.6. Week 15, 66.7. Week 17, 90.5. Week 18, 90.3. So it's just something to know. What I would say here is there were absolutely times, especially in the mid-year, when we were talking about how the offense is on the cusp, that Jordan Love at times was trying to force the scheme, right? And one of the things that really developed for him in the second half of the year was hanging back and allowing the play to develop, trusting his receivers would be where they were supposed to be when they were supposed to be there, or even trusting himself to find the guy who did break open. So maybe, is it the cause of his success? No, probably not. But is it an element that we should recognize? Yeah, if Jordan Love, there's certainly a trend here, takes longer to throw, it might ultimately be a good thing. Let's take a look at the running back position now. And again, I'm going to talk about the feature guy. Yeah, pictures of him in a Packer uniform, still kind of tough to find. But Josh Jacobs, obviously, the running back 1. And Josh Jacobs did not have the most successful season last year. We know that. That's not new. His last year with the Las Vegas Raiders was not his best. But when you dive into some numbers, there are some things that are even a little more troubling than just saying, well, it was just the blocking around him was bad. Or look at the supporting cast he had. It was bad. The Raiders were better 2 years ago. Or he was healthier 2 years ago, right? Okay, but when we look at elusiveness, there's something to keep in mind here. Keep in mind, the elusiveness grade from PFF is basically a measure of how effective a runner was, how good they were at missing tackles, how good they were at getting the expected yardage, etc. But they do it independent of blocking. Is it a perfect metric? No, but you can generally say that good running backs have good scores, bad running backs don't, right? Okay, so with Jacobs, he's now been in the league for 5 seasons. And listen to his elusiveness grade over these 5 years. 2019, his rookie year, 103.6. 2020, 56.2. 21, 73.4. 22, 82.5. And then 23, 32.2. Remember that this grade attempts to grade the runner independent of blocking. So you can't look at that and be like, well, it's because his blocking was terrible. Like, no, Jacobs also, at least per this metric, was not fantastic. So if he were to improve that ranking, his stats would improve much more in line with 2022 when he was one of the best running backs in football. Keep in mind, a little bit more context here, okay? Of running backs with at least 140 carries, I want you to get an idea of just how rough this number was last season. Of running backs with 140 carries, Josh Jacobs was dead last in the NFL with that 32.2 grade. For reference, because I know it's probably on your mind a little, Aaron Jones last year was an effectiveness grade, or an elusiveness grade, I should say, of 58.5, a 90 fewer carries. Now, I'm not critiquing the Packers' move by any stretch. These are just numbers. These are facts, right? But really, it stands to reason that if Josh Jacobs can be more elusive, like he was in 2022, or like he was his rookie season, 2019, those happen to be 2 of his most successful years in terms of even yards per carry. They certainly were 2 of his most efficient years running the ball. If he can get back to that, then we'll see that Josh Jacobs of old as well. And of course, playing with a better offensive line, it ain't gonna hurt the cause. Moving on to the next player for wide receivers, I chose the one player who I think out of all of the Packers could see this mass elevation in his play this year. That would be second-year wide receiver Dontavian Wicks. Okay, and there's something that I want to play. It's a short little clip, and just bear this in mind, okay? Dontavian Wicks, his usage sometimes gets a little underestimated, I think. Amongst players, he was 3rd in targets last year on the Packers. He was 3rd in route percentage. So basically that means in terms of like he's on the field for a throwing play. He's actually running a route. He's not a decoy, not a pseudo blocker, whatever, right? And then he was also 2nd amongst all of the wide receivers in run blocking grade. All of that's important in just a second. But I do want you to just watch this clip. So check it out.
Dontavian Wicks, Matt, there's just so much green on this guy's profile. The corner route, great. Out route was amazing, was awesome. Curl route, great. Post route, good. Dig route, good. One number that just obviously just flies off the page for me is the out route. 11% of his routes were out routes, and he has a 90% success rate.
I love the ability to work those in-breaking routes we talked about, right? The slant and the curl. His dig route success rate, 70.6%. That's solidly within the NFL average. But yeah, it's that ability to win on the out route that I thought was really fascinating. I don't know if Dontavian Wicks can be like a true number 1 receiver, but I do know that true number 1 receivers dominate both on vertical outbreaking routes and over the middle of the field. And we see Dontavian Wicks like do that.
I think there's a lot about his profile that we could take away and say, yeah, this guy's interesting. Let's take a little deeper dive and see what year number 2 brings. Dontavian Wicks, Matt, there's just...
Yeah, let's just take a little deeper dive. So, I mean, ultimately, that came from Matt Harmon and his Reception Perception, the show. They do a lot of that conversation, actually, where they assess wide receivers' ability on different routes or how effective or efficient they were on those routes in a given year. So here's the thing. Everyone for months now has been talking about Dontavian Wicks and how he could be the breakout star. Kind of what Harmon said. Like, I don't know if he can be, you know, a number 1 alpha wide receiver in the NFL, but certainly look at this. It looks awfully good. And so I found myself kind of asking, like, what was the flaw last year for Wicks? What was it? Like, maybe he's not a good run blocker, right? So I decided to dive into that a little bit. Nope, 2nd best on the team, behind only Bo Melton. We talked about that the other day, how we were surprised at that. You know, and then I thought, well, maybe he's just not getting targeted. No, 3rd in the team. Maybe he's not running enough route. No, he's high up on the team there as well. So the thing for Dontavian Wicks is, by all accounts, it's like every metric is there. right? He's one of the best route runners on the team already. He's one of the best run blockers on the team already. He was effective in the red zone. He was effective everywhere. So what does Dontavian Wicks need to truly statistically ascend? Not a lot. And that's the real truth of it, because I tried to find the flaw. I tried to find the thing that just said, well, like, if he improves, like I did with Jacobs, right? I looked over Jacobs and I said, like, what is it what was part of the rationale for why he had a bad year last year? Oh, his elusiveness rating sucks. How did Love have such success in the second half of the year? Well, here's a statistical trend. Wicks, there isn't one. Dude just needs the ball more. And then we might just really see him go. For the tight end position, let's take a look at Luke Musgrave. And yeah, I did kind of choose that picture for a reason, because the second-year tight end, he's got some struggle buses in his statistical profile. Now we know the athletic traits are there, right? And he was very productive last year. Even from a drop standpoint, he was one of the best tight ends in all of the NFL last year in terms of his drop percentage at under 3%. He had only one drop on the year. But even difficult catches, if you don't come down with the ball, you may not be assigned a drop. But eventually, if you want to be one of the top tight ends in the NFL, you eventually do have to come down with the ball. Think back to last year. When was Luke Musgrave the most successful? One, when he could stay on his feet, but two, when he was open, wide open. And of course, Luke had something to do with getting open. I'm not minimizing that impact, but the truth is, it's when he was open. Like wide open. Think of his biggest plays of the year. He was completely alone, right? And then Love just had to kind of drop the ball in a bucket. Where he did struggle, though, and where if he gets this as a real part of his regimen, is kind of becoming a bulldog, a contested catch master. Of the 27 tight ends in the NFL last year with at least 45 targets, 4 contested catch targets was the fewest. 1 catch that Musgrave had was also the fewest. And I'm going to say this one really does meet the eye test. Think back to last year. Like the negatives for Musgrave, beyond the health, obviously, because that's kind of a precursor, but the big negatives for Musgrave last year was, well, sometimes he just can't get his footing, but then other times, like if he's covered, if he's in tight coverage, if someone is on him, he may not come down with the ball. And no, it's not going to like bash off his hands and be a drop, but he's not necessarily going to be the one to come down with it. And now the numbers bear that out. So if he can improve in this area, and it's difficult to say why exactly it's occurring, whether it's body position, hand strength, etc., but nonetheless, the numbers bear it out. 1 of 4 uncontested catches. If that number can get better, then I would expect that we'll see Luke Musgrave with his athletic profile become more of a weapon in the red zone for the Green Bay Packers, because last year he only had 1 touchdown, which again was near the bottom, tied for second lowest, I believe, of the 27 tight ends with at least 45 targets. If Musgrave can add this element to his game, become a little bit more of a bruiser in that regard, then we may see one heck of a statistical ascension for the uber athletic tight end. And then for the offensive line, last one I'm going to talk about today, Elton. Oh, Elton, how I do wish you returned to form in certain regards. PFF just listed Elton Jenkins in an article that dropped today as one of the top 20 guards in the NFL. And part of their justification for that was the fact that while his 65.4 overall offensive grade was the lowest grade of his career, he was one of the only guards in the entire NFL to not allow a sack. Plus, I should add that his 97.8 pass blocking efficiency was second highest on the team, behind only John Runyon Jr. But where he has truly fallen off since that ACL injury happens to be not in his pass blocking, but rather in his run blocking. In 2019, his rookie season, his run blocking grade was 65.7. 2020, 62.3. 21, 76.4. And keep in mind, 21 may be Elton Jenkins' like most successful year of his career. So, yeah. Just as an aside. And then in 22, 71.8, and in 23, 57.3. It was the lowest run blocking grade of his career. It was his lowest overall grade of his career. So the reasons here could be aplenty. I think just looking at the eyeball test, we've even talked about this in some lives. Elton Jenkins, since coming back from his injury, doesn't seem to have the same kind of violent mentality on the line that he once did earlier in his career. But there may be a little larger context here. See, because last year he predominantly played with Rasheed Walker, right? Rasheed Walker's run blocking grade, 57.9. See, but compare that to the year prior with David Bakhtiari, it was 68.5. And Bakhtiari, even before that, like 2021 was the miss, but like 2020, David Bakhtiari had one of the best run blocking grades in the NFL for all tackles. So Elgton Jenkins is perhaps used to playing next to a more elevated run blocking tackle. And maybe for Elgton to improve in this regard, Rasheed Walker has to play as well. But if we're going to talk about Elgton Jenkins as being the premier offensive lineman, maybe with Zach Tom, of this Packers offensive line, then Elgton has to lead the charge as well. So Elgton Jenkins ultimately, and it is hard to find numbers for offensive linemen, right? But looking at Elgton Jenkins, we can say, in order for him to ascend to being in the top true echelon of guards in the NFL, it does rest in his run blocking. He's got to get back to where he was not too long ago. Thanks everybody so much for joining me here on Lombardi Time Brews. I do hope that you are having a wonderful Friday. I hope you have a great weekend. I'll be back on Monday covering the defense and the special teams, trying to find, again, statistical trends that, if reversed, or maybe will be enlightening for how a player can ascend to a new level. Have a great weekend, everybody, and as always, go Pack Go.